Hello, darling. I'm home. What's for dinner? Hello, darling. There's a pot pie in the oven, and I'll make you a martini. Just sit down and tell me all about your day. Work, work, work. We're all so sick of work. Hello, everyone. My name is Jocelyn, you may call me Joy, and I'm going to talk to you about work, or rather, anti-work. So, some of you may have already heard about this, but I'll explain anyway, just because it's good to get a few definitions down. Anti-work is, as far as I can tell, an ideology rather than a movement, although it has been referred to such, as the idea that is basically anti-capitalism, especially late-stage capitalism, like the one that we're living in right now, or at least that's what it's been dubbed, an idea that is essentially against the slavish treatment of employed people today and throughout history. Everyone suffers under capitalism. You may have heard that said before, and it's mostly true for 99% of the population. Everyone suffers under capitalism, except the 1% that's on top. The ones that don't answer to anyone above them because they are on top. Everyone else within this, I don't want to say pyramid because that kind of gives the wrong impression, but the system that is tiered, that has way more people on the bottom than it does on the top, has a chain of command almost, and people on the bottom rung get treated the worst, despite the fact that they work super hard, just as hard if not harder than the CEOs at the top. Why should it be that a CEO who goes to so-called important meetings and has more money than God gets treated way better than someone who is on the bottom rung of society, who is, say, making coffees or pouring pints for a living and gets treated like absolute garbage by every Karen that walks in? And why is it that systemically that person gets paid a fraction of what the person on top does, despite the fact that they are all working within the same system? It's unfair. It's unjust. This is anti-capitalism, leftism 101 here. This isn't breaking stuff, but I'm trying to lay down the foundation of what I'm about to talk about. So specifically in the stage of capitalism that we live in today, what's been called late stage capitalism, we have workers on the bottom rungs of the corporate ladder who receive unfair wages that have been stagnant for decades now. And when I say stagnant, I mean not increasing at the same rate as inflation has. Basically, your money just doesn't go as far as it used to. This is by design. This is part of the system, keeping the low people down and the high people up. This is also what's caused the cost of living crisis that we're currently facing. See, without enough money coming in as income from work, people then cannot afford to pay for essentials such as rent, despite the fact that landlords are increasing property prices at a rate that's higher than people's incomes. Sounds like a bit of a crisis to me. And of course, the billionaires at the top, how did they make their money? Surely we can learn something from them. Well, no, actually. See, wealth tends to be inherited, and that entrepreneurial grind set like mentality doesn't apply to everyone, because you can be a superb worker who makes coffees better and faster than anyone, but you're still not going to reach the higher upper echelons of the corporate ladder. The lie that capitalism feeds you is that we live in a meritocracy. You do hard work, you get rewarded for it. That's just not how it works. Workers face not only the challenges of the system itself, but also, on a more individualistic level, horrible bosses who resort to punitive measures in order to force people to work harder, longer, for less money. What with the improvements of technology and science, it seems almost ridiculous that people are working 3 jobs, long hours, late nights, more stress, terrible working conditions, and receiving less compensation for it. This is really all part of a conglomeration of systems that was designed to fuck over the working classes. Again, this shouldn't really be new to anyone. This is like sociology's introduction to work. Have you ever heard of work being referred to as prostitution? You should have done. Working is essentially selling your labor, your body, your functioning capabilities for money. And don't even get me started about the absolute hell that is recruitment. CVs full of exaggerations and LinkedIn profiles full of what are essentially lies. People just trying to scrabble to get some kind of crumb of employment, some kind of, decent living wage and decent working conditions. So when I say anti-work, what I mean is an ideology that is against all of these things. People who frequent or even just casually look up anti-work groups online, the subreddit, that kind of thing, are against the mistreatment of working class people. And the way to rebel against that is to drop out of the system entirely. Hence, anti-work. It's not really about sitting down, doing nothing, eating crisps, playing video games all day. That would get boring. Besides which, it's not very productive. Certainly not very fulfilling. Sure, it might sound fun for a week, and then the restlessness will eventually set in, or at least it does for me, and it does for most people. A lot of people, the ones that enjoy their work, do it not for the money, but for the love of the labour that they do. What people who believe in anti-work generally say and purport is that they are willing to work, but they are not willing to work within the confines of an unfair system that dicks them over. Why should they? Why should anyone? I'm going to show on screen some of the questions that I've been asked when applying for jobs recently. Diversity questions. Gender identity, female, male, prefer not to say, non-binary, don't know, trans man, trans woman, gender fluid, gender queer, trans boy, trans girl. What? This is too much even for me. Pretty sure you can lump trans boy and trans man together. Pretty sure you can lump trans woman and trans girl together as well. It's nice to have the like diverse options, sure, like when filling in one of these questionnaires. And I know that the results aren't supposed to affect the outcome of whether the applicant gets the job or not. But at the same time, this seems like overkill. Especially compared to the next question, which is about ethnicity, which says Arab, other ethnic group, decline to answer Black African Caribbean, Black British, Black Irish, mixed multiple ethnic groups, Asian, Asian British, Asian Irish, or white. That's it. White. Not even like British or Irish white versus European white. This was not a question, but just a part of an explanation to what would happen in a telephone interview or an in-person interview. We analyse pronunciation against the selected neutral accent benchmark and disfluencies in speech patterns such as unnatural pauses, rate and flow, which make the audio responses inadequate. What they're saying is any non-standard accent will be dismissed. And this is all done by software, not even by people. It's using AI to depersonalize the discrimination that's happening there. Like, if someone is, let's just say, not a native English speaker who speaks English really well but still has an accent, then they probably wouldn't get through to the next level of the employment process, which is discrimination. Let's say, what about someone whose first language is English, but they come from a different part of the country, let alone different part of the world? Let's say, someone who has a Liverpudlian accent would sound very different to me. My speaking accent is rather close to standard Southern British English. But someone from the north of England would sound totally different. And this admits to penalising that. This is the kind of absolute hellscape that is recruitment, that is called out by the anti-work people. How about this lovely doozy of a question? Reason for seeking new employment. How do you tell someone that the job market sucks in a polite way, an employable way? How do you tell someone that you've had so much stress up to here that you just can't deal with the current living condition that you're in the job that you're in the amount of money that you're getting, in whatever bad situation that you're in that makes you need to seek other employment and sound employable and professional and amazing at the same time, and of course be polite about your previous employer or your current employer, because doing anything other than that would also look unprofessional. Previous employment history. Now this is a fairly standard question, but it says please detail any previous employment, paid or voluntary, most recent first, and account for any gaps. Gaps in my CV are very hard to account for. You either get a recruiter who is completely understanding about every situation that you've been in, about the job market being sucky and awful, not only now, but also back in 2008 when there was a first recession, or you get a recruiter who is trapped in the grindset mindset of you just need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. I have lots of gaps in my CV because I have been dealing with mental health issues pretty much my entire adult life, on and off. But that kind of thing is very difficult to explain in a CV where you are trying to make yourself look the most employable as possible. And I know they're not supposed to discriminate against people with health conditions of any kind. But in the back of their mind, they're going to think, well, hey, is this person going to need to take 2 months, 3 months, a year off? Not worth employing. This one was such an annoying thing. Please outline below why you are interested in this post, your reasons for applying for this post, and any other information you feel is relevant. Fine, fair question, but then please refer to the job description and explain how you meet the competencies in the Young Somerset Competency Framework provided when giving this information. So what they want is the information that they've provided about the job regurgitated to them in such a way that it looks like your own work. Sounds like an exercise in futility, if you ask me. References. Please supply the names of 2 people to whom reference may be made concerning suitability for this post. The first must be your current or most recent employer, and the second should not be the same employer. What if you're leaving your job because your employer is the problem? What if you're being treated really badly by your employer? Or worse, what if you're in an awful kind of grey area where you kind of like the employer, but they also kind of suck? And of course, no video about this topic, anti-work, would be complete without discussing that interview. For those of you who are unaware or uninitiated, about a year ago, Jesse Waters on Fox News interviewed a member, then moderator, of the anti-work subreddit called Doreen Ford. They called anti-work a movement, which again, I'm not sure that it is or not, but Doreen explains that people on the subreddit are fed up with being trapped by corporatism, just want to feel respected, adequately rewarded by their jobs and by society at large. Doreen also talked about the value of rest in between work. Work and leisure balance is healthy in people's lives. Looking back on it now, I think that the interview didn't go as badly as people said it did. Unhappily for Doreen, they were kicked off being a moderator of the subreddit, and I don't know if they're still even a member of anti-work. Doreen did not get anyone's permission or anyone's approval before doing this interview, which probably wasn't a good idea in the first place, but Doreen didn't make a great job of explaining what anti-work is about. And optically, the whole thing was a bit of a mess. Like I said, I think it could have gone worse. But obviously, what with it being Fox News, very corporatist, right-wing bias going on there, they tried to, Jesse Waters tried to paint Doreen as a kook, a crazy leftist who doesn't want to work, who's basically a bad caricature of what Doreen actually was, what anti-work actually means. Waters talked down to Doreen quite a lot during the interview, although I do think he could have been worse. He was doing the bidding of the agenda of corporatism itself, so speaking up against it in that kind of format wasn't easy by any means. I mean, as someone who has recently been interviewed in a public kind of media sphere, I know that it's very hard to say all the things that you really want to say in a time crunch situation, like an interview. And I think Doreen wasn't given the fair chance to explain that they were against capitalist forces that work to make people work high stress jobs, long hours, in meaningless bullshit jobs, with the emphasis being on productivity rather than people's well-being. Certainly not the workers, but also consumers as well. Consumers get dicked over by capitalism all the time, being sold junk or false promises. At one point, Waters very condescendingly asked Doreen, why not just quit your job then? If you don't like the work that you're doing, don't do it. Get another job. This is a trapping of the mindset, of the grind set mindset. Like, what other job? Doreen themselves said that they actually enjoyed their work, their job, as a dog walker. Which is fine. But there are still so many people who are trapped in horrible jobs with horrible bosses, terrible pay, that have no other options. Because you either work or you lose the roof over your head and the food in your belly. And one bullshit job feels a lot like a different bullshit job. Like whether you're working in a McDonald's or a Starbucks, it's still the same kind of bullshit that you have to put up with. And it's so easy, so very, very easy for Waters to sit there condescendingly to Doreen when he's in his God knows how much it cost Armani suit, his groomed appearance, his high-profile job on national television. That is to say, I hope that I have at least outlined and explained the anti-work ideology well enough in this part of the video, because it all plays into what happened to me. So, I guess you're all wondering by now, what was my story? Why did I leave a perfectly functional job? It wasn't really that functional. For those of you that don't know, I have been working in the same place for the past year and a half. I've been working the same job for nearly 4 years, on and off throughout the whole pandemic era. And doing pub work, the same job for that long, has definitely taught me a lot of things. About life, about people, about myself, and I am very, very grateful for those experiences. However, it got to the point where I felt so ground down, so worn out, so physically and mentally incapable of dealing with things at work and in life. It's at this point I ask myself, what happened to my dreams? Let's not get it twisted, this probably is some sort of a early midlife crisis, but that's sort of a separate issue. My job, what I did. The money was good, it was enough to live on, but it wasn't great. I used to enjoy the responsibility of being in charge, of dealing with people, customers, on, that kind of professional yet friendly basis. But between the long shifts, sometimes up to 9 hours without breaks, and on my feet constantly, I was left not only physically exhausted, but drained, with no motivation, no energy to do much of anything else during my free time. The shifts were always horribly timed, either early or late, so getting a good night's sleep was never really an option. And my feet and ankles were constantly sore even when I wasn't there, and they still are damaged to this day. Bear in mind, this is a job I quit 2 months ago now. Dealing with the public, this is its own barrel of fuckitude. Dealing with them after they've got to that bad state And, as a bartender, you do not serve drunk people. It is technically against the law, but people are sneaky and they will sneak anything past you if they can. And being that it was fairly busy with either one or two staff members and a whole room full of drunk idiots, yeah, a lot slips past you without consciously meaning to. So I kind of saw my job as like pouring napalm onto a forest fire. And I don't think morally, ethically, or responsibly that any job should compel someone to enable people becoming assholes just for profit. And I don't just mean the openly loud, obnoxious, or rude customers either. I had to deal with people who I genuinely did not like and had to pretend that I did. People that I did not respect, people with vile opinions. Racist, ableist, homophobic, sexist, you name it. And only when they get at their worst did I feel at all able to say anything about it. And even then, I have got in trouble for it in the past. I got in trouble for calling out other people's bad behaviour. Never mind some of the more subtle microaggressions that exist within society and in people's minds that my former employer just wasn't on the same wavelength as me when it came to recognizing these things. And sometimes when they do get so bad, it kind of felt like just babysitting a bunch of psychos. This isn't just the pub I worked in either. This is all pubs. Very rarely you will find somewhere that is calm enough and composed enough to not allow any of the bad behaviour that I've just mentioned. Pub culture in the UK is out of control. And please, don't get me wrong. Some of the people I've met through working in the jobs that I've had, over the past 2 jobs that I've had, are the nicest people I've ever met. And I've gone camping with some people that I met through doing bar work. But the pressure of dealing with what I had to deal with in my previous job, that is to say, one on the bar, one in the kitchen, a small pub, but still the pressure of being in charge, in control of that situation with dozens of people around you, all of them getting less and less in control because of the substances that I'm providing for them as part of that job, running and overseeing everything. That pressure got to me. I will of course say that certain exceptions occurred quite frequently, such as Fridays, Saturdays, cricket days, special occasions where there would be more staff on to accommodate for more people, but it was still hectic and disorienting and stressful. I can't even describe the amount of stress. And that's the thing to really watch for, because stress is an actual killer. At all jobs where there is a customer-facing element, any customer could be literally any kind of crazy. A druggie, a scammer, a weirdo. I have seen it all. I never really knew where I stood with that job. Management that was difficult to predict and therefore difficult to work for and to be around. Someone who jumped to conclusions, who growled and grumbled and also had my back, and also did some really nice things for me and helped me sort out my electric when I needed it. So I want to just stay away. Focus on me. Focus on my mental health. That's why I quit my job. I felt so compressed, so squished into this shape that wasn't really me. And now look, I'm getting back to myself again. It's taking some time, but it's what I need. It's how I need to take care of myself. Not just the pressure of bar work, but of any work that compresses and squashes a person's individuality to the point of no return. That's where the most psychological damage lies. And I'm not just talking about myself. I don't think anyone should have to deal with the amount of stress that I have had to deal with over the past few years. I genuinely think there are ways to improve things, improve life, improve working conditions for people that just aren't being met. If only management would listen more to the workers. Yes, I am pro-union as well. But more than just that, like, working for money is definitely one thing we can't really avoid in a capitalist society. And while I am taking this mental health break, I am also losing money. I'm using my savings to live on currently. Also that I can feel better, just so that I can be strong enough to enter back into the world of work. And thus the vicious cycle continues. But more than just that, there are things that I would rather do. Things that anyone would rather do. YouTube videos to watch, to learn from, and to make, just as I am making one right now. Putting together another drag show, practicing, rehearsing, and eventually performing that. Learning new languages. I've tried learning Tokipona, I'm currently learning sign language. Fitting all that in, along with leisure time, gaming, talking to people, going out, having a healthy social life, and the usual chores like cleaning and getting groceries. And I'm just so tired. Not tired of work, tired from work. And while I was working, I was so unable to focus on not only the real issues in the world, but also I was unable to focus on the job I was doing at the time. And the way my stress response worked was that it eventually just made me freeze. My brain fogged up. My body hurt, physically hurt. I ended up making more and more mistakes at work, rather than fewer and fewer, like you're supposed to when you work at a place for a long time and you end up making progress. And you may be saying, this all sounds a bit like a poor me speech. Well, I want to share with you a few statistics. The phrase "no one wants to work anymore" has been around for over 120 years. Why do you think that might be? Could it genuinely be that people do not want to work? Or could it be that there are alternative ways to contribute to society external to a capitalist model? And although workers can see it, the people who hold the means of production also see it and are keen to keep those workers stifled with inadequate wages and terrible working conditions. A new survey has concluded that roughly 80% of people hate their job. Why should that be? In such an advanced, modern society, why is punishment still regarded as the norm for work? And why is it those lucky few, the 20%, actually get to enjoy their jobs? Why can't everyone enjoy their jobs? Even if it is a boring crap job, like, even if it is serving burgers for the masses, there should still be protocols in place to ensure that people do not suffer whilst working. That's like the bare minimum of what society should be striving for. What kind of a fucked up system is it where that happens? Not just to me, but to people regularly. So that's what happened. There was no giant big explosion between me and my boss. It was just the accumulation of small things that grew into big things. The things that are deemed normal in our society at the moment. The things that I need to take time in order to get back to who I am, really. I can only hope that someday everyone else is as fortunate as me to at least have the opportunity to take some time to find themselves. So now what? Where do I go from here? The truth is, I have no idea. This in itself was one of the hardest videos that I have ever made. It's very personal. I am extremely vulnerable. I'm dealing with the stress of trying to create a video that explains everything in a way that I am satisfied with, at the same time as dealing with the stress of being unemployed and having money issues and this whole clusterfuck of I don't know what going on in my brain. Part of me was tempted to try and prove myself as being unwell enough by listing my symptoms, and to be frank, I don't think that's going to help anyone. How my mental health is impacted is a matter for me and my doctors. And yes, it is somewhat easy to, I imagine, be on the outside looking in, thinking that my problems pale in comparison to those of others, especially now around the world, who are dealing with losing their livelihoods, their children, their houses, their hospitals, their lives. Problems and evils exist within the world, and unfortunately I think they always will. That doesn't stop me from having issues that are personal to me. That doesn't stop those things from mattering to me and hindering me progressing in my life right now. But this video is already rather long and I'm not going to take up too much time. So I will just say that my next video is going to be a springboard platform for me to jump off into not just good mental health, but also good well-being in general in terms of the world of work, which is what this entire trilogy of videos is going to be about. Until then, in the meantime, non-binary is valid, goddammit. And look after yourselves. This in itself was one of the hardest videos that I've had to... For fuck's sake. Get off the camera, you stupid shit. Of the antiwork subgroup. That's subreddit. Fuck. Wait for the fucking siren to go. And still not reach the upper reaches of the corporate ladder. Let me say that again. But I'm trying to lay down the essentially against the slavish treatment of employed people today. Let's try that again. Hello, darling. Oh God, no.